A bone-chilling night settles over the Colorado Plateau. Headlights slice through a thin veil of fog hanging in the air. On the sideline, Deion Sanders stands in his trademark hoodie, staring out at a crowd that knows the name Coach Prime by heart. To them, he isn't simply a college football coach. He is a living legend, a figure America started building monuments to decades ago. This is the only man in history who ever played in both a Super Bowl and a World Series. The man who took the dream of a two-sport athlete and turned it from fantasy into reality with blistering speed and almost supernatural instincts. He won 2 Super Bowl rings, appeared on baseball's biggest stage, earned a spot in the NFL Hall of Fame, and remains an unavoidable name in every argument about the greatest quarterback to ever play the game. Prime Time became more than an athlete. He became a cultural symbol, from flashy suits and gold chains, to end-zone-length celebration runs, to bold quotes every sports fan still remembers. And when he finally hung up his cleats, he didn't disappear the way so many stars do. He stepped onto a new platform, first the NFL analyst desk, then the head coach at Jackson State, pulling national attention to HBCS before shaking the entire sport again at Colorado, where every single one of his games suddenly became must-watch television. But behind all that fame is a body that has been opened by surgeons no fewer than 14 times, a left foot that lost to toes just so he could keep walking, a bladder removed and replaced with an artificial one that turns simply standing up into a quiet struggle. Behind the dark glasses and the half-smile is a man who was once desperate enough to drive his car off a cliff, who watched marriages fall apart, and who raised his children under the glare of non-stop media attention. Beneath the laughter and confidence are sleepless nights filled with pain, fear of blood clots returning, and the haunting thought that he might collapse right in front of the young players who depend on him. He vowed to lead people towards something better, and it is in those darkest moments that Deion's will burns the brightest. He refuses to quit. He refuses to wear the label of victim, turning every scar on his body into a lesson for the next generation. Every morning, even when his body fights him, he forces himself out of bed, taking slow but steady steps toward the practice field. Because if God kept him alive after the cliff, after the surgeries, after cancer, then the rest of his life isn't meant for complaining. It's meant for standing before young black men searching for a way out of their own darkness, locking eyes with them and saying, "If I'm still standing here, then you don't get to give up." And if Deion's story behind the stadium lights moves you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so we can keep following this scar-filled journey together. Now let's move to the next chapter, back to Fort Myers, where a black kid named Deion Sanders first learned how to outrun the destiny set in front of him. Fort Myers, Florida in the 70s and 80s looked nothing like the tourist brochures filled with beaches and glowing cruise ships, especially not for a kid like Deion Sanders. It was a quiet battlefield inside America, where gunshots cracked through the night-like routine, where police and ambulance sirens became the background music of everyday life. Dilapidated wooden houses with peeling paint and rusted tin roofs were packed tightly along wet, broken streets. On sagging porches sat smoking men. Women hid behind closed doors, and children played ball beside empty liquor bottles scattered across the ground. For a black boy growing up there, the future was usually painted in only 3 shades: poverty, addiction, prison. Deion's biological father, Mim Sanders, was the clearest illustration of that grim picture. He drifted in and out of jail like it was seasonal labor, disappearing for months at a time, only to reappear on the sidewalk, slumped with eyes dulled as though the light had long since left them. Whenever he returned home, he brought only one thing with him: the hunger of addiction. Money in the house vanished during his nighttime excursions. Desires and hopes slowly faded, leaving behind a cold kitchen and an empty fridge for little Deion. He wasn't merely a pitiful father. He was a living prophecy. If you fall, this is what awaits. Connie, his mother, grew visibly thinner with each passing year. She juggled 2, sometimes 3 jobs: cleaning, waiting tables, anything that traded hours for a few dollars to feed her children. Her hands cracked, her back ached, yet every time she returned home, she forced a smile, cooked something fragrant, just enough for the kids to forget the rumble of their empty stomachs. Some nights, Deion woke to the sounds of furniture slamming, glasses shattering, and the slurred curses of a drunk man. Once, he saw Mims raise his hand, bloodshot eyes glaring, reeking of booze and sweat. Honey stood in front of him, trembling but refusing to back down. She scooped Deion into her arms, held him tightly, ran to the bedroom, and slammed the door shut. Fists pounded on the wood. Curses echoed from the other side, and inside that dark room, young Deion curled against his mother's chest, feeling her heart hammering wildly in fear. That moment wasn't just a memory. It became the first scar on the child's mind, teaching him that home isn't always safe. Even after Mims finally disappeared from daily life, then another man came into the house, Willie Knight, Deion's stepfather. Willie was imperfect. He carried the smell of cheap liquor home each evening, along with the fatigue of grueling labor. But unlike Mims, Willie paid the rent on time, brought food to the table, fixed the leaking roof, replaced burned-out bulbs. By day, he was the provider, teaching Deion that a man gets up early, works hard even when exhausted, and finishes the job before thinking of fun at night. He often sat alone in the living room, TV on low, bottle quietly on the table, eyes staring off into some distant place. To Deion, the image of Willie bathed in dim yellow light, his shadow stretching long across the wall, was the second warning. Even if you escape physical prison, many men remain trapped in an invisible one, shackled by fatigue, disappointment, and the bottle. At school, Deion wasn't promised any brighter path. Teachers were too busy to pin high hopes on a boy in old clothes. Constantly alert, always on guard, they glanced at the roster, saw the name Sanders, and assumed this was just another boy destined to drop out or end up in the system. And soon enough, Deion's friends began to fall away like autumn leaves. One was arrested for petty theft, another was shot in a minor scuffle, yet another got hooked on drugs and vanished from the battlefield forever. Occasionally, local news named a familiar face, not in sports, but in crime reports. Each time, Deion didn't just lose a friend, he saw another version of himself swallowed by the Fort Myers trap. The entire neighborhood felt like one giant cage, streets narrowing into prison, the graveyard, or a life with no escape. Many nights, he lay on his creaky bed, listening to police sirens outside, thinking, here, you either jump out or you die inside. There's no third option. One afternoon, barely a teenager, Deion stood on a familiar street corner in Mims, his biological father, slumped on the sidewalk, back against a grimy brick wall, eyes blank. Staring into nothing, the man who once carried him on his shoulders was now reduced to a thin shadow, clothes rumpled, hands trembling as he held a cigarette. Deion didn't move closer. He stayed far enough away not to smell the liquor, yet close enough to see clearly the dead-end path the whole neighborhood seemed destined for. In that moment, he made a vow to himself, not spoken aloud, but etched in stone, deep in his heart. He promised he would run fast enough that even that shadow could never catch him. He would run away from Fort Myers, from the stench of alcohol, from the sirens, from the lifeless eyes of his father. What Deion didn't yet realize was that this vow, while shielding him from the inevitable sentence of poverty, addiction, and prison, also became another lifelong sentence to keep running, to stay strong, to succeed, to always move forward. Because if he ever stopped, even for a heartbeat, everything he had fled from would come rushing back, catch him, and swallow him whole, just as it had done to countless other men in Fort Myers. Fort Myers High School perched on the edge of the city amid pothole-filled streets and weary, single-story homes, looking nothing like a factory cranking out the American dream. The football field was a patchwork of green and yellow grass, faded yard lines, and old metal bleachers that groaned under each slightly heavier step in the late afternoons. As the sun sank red behind the trees, Dim yellow lights flickered on, revealing peeling paint, rusted seats, and the faces of black, brown, and white students, all blended together in the same scene of quiet poverty. To many, it was just another high school field. But for Deion Sanders, it was the only place on earth where he could feel like he was more than zero. On that uneven turf, the boy from a stifling house suddenly became the center of attention. Deion played 3 sports: football, baseball, basketball. Friday afternoons, he was the cornerback whose speed made the bleachers roar. Evenings, he was the basketball player leaping high to snatch the ball. Weekends, he was in the outfield, eyes locked on every pitch. The name Sanders began to echo more often over the school PA, mentioned in team meetings by coaches, whispered at lunch among friends, for the first time in his life. Beyond the curses and pitying looks reserved for a poor kid, Deion heard the sound of recognition. Yet each time the final whistle blew, each time the school lights gradually dimmed, he stepped off the field, trudged through the muddy parking lot, and returned to the house where he had grown up. His mother was still bent over the sink, washing dishes with a back more hunched each year. Bills still lay unpaid on the table. The old TV crackled with local crime reports. His cleats were still caked in mud, the number 2 on his jersey still soaked in sweat. Deion knew the instant he crossed that threshold, he was no longer the 3-sports star. He was back to being the kid. Teachers didn't expect much from the son of a man who had vanished into the prison system. The child who constantly wondered if his mother would have enough money for milk tomorrow. One afternoon, Deion huddled with a few friends in a corner of the field, laughing loudly, but still keeping wary eyes toward the alley where gangs littered. A police car rolled up. The door opened. A white officer stepped out, but not with a hand on his gun or a threatening tone. He walked straight toward the group, scanning each face, and stopped at Deion, the smaller kid, but with eyes sharper and more cautious than the others. He didn't ask, "What are you kids doing here?" He simply asked, "Do you like football?" That single question, in that moment, opened a door Deion had never imagined he would walk through. The officer introduced him to the police athletic league, PAL, where cops use sports to steer kids away from trouble. He spoke about training, about games, about the chance to improve, not to be better than anyone else, but to be better than you were yesterday. Deion listened, half skeptical, half drawn to the idea of spending more time on the field instead of wandering the streets. Yet what truly kept him engaged wasn't football, it was the look in the man's eyes, a white man in uniform representing authority. In Deion's neighborhood, authority usually appeared in handcuffs, not standing there, looking at him like someone worth saving, not someone already doomed to be arrested. It was a rare moment for Deion, realizing that, somewhere beyond his mom and a handful of relatives, someone actually believed he was worth the effort. Slowly, he began showing up for PAL training more often, running harder, jumping higher. Every highlight on the field, a pick, a long throw, a home run, brought small bursts of applause that warmed him from the inside. But behind that noise, a childish yet relentless voice whispered in his head, "One wrong step, and you'll end up like your father. One slip, and you'll find yourself slumped on the sidewalk with dead eyes just like his." When friends invited him to hang out late, to gather in the spots the cops patrolled, Deion thought of him slumped against a wall, his mother holding him as they ran into the bedroom, the bottle on the table in front of Whaley, and instead of joining them, he turned it and ran back to the field. With each passing season, Deion's stats at North Fort Myers High School grew more impressive. Coaches began talking to colleges. Strangers showed up in the stands with notepads. He felt a mix of excitement and fear. Excited, because for the first time, the door of the Fort Myers trap seemed to crack open. Terrified, because he knew that if he didn't grasp it, it could slam shut forever. Then one day, a letter arrived, thin paper, like any other piece of junk mail, but marked with the Florida State University Seminoles logo, heavy like a verdict, a football scholarship, a chance to play at the next level, appear on TV, leave the familiar area code behind. Deion held the letter for a long time, sweat from his hands soaking into the paper. To many, it was just the next step for a talented athlete. To him, it was the only ticket out of the sentence of poverty, addiction, and prison that Fort Myers had already written for him. The night before leaving the Sanders house was quieter than usual. Deion lay in bed, eyes wide open in the dark. From the living room came the familiar sounds of his stepdad, Willie, talking to himself in front of the TV, the bottle thudding on the table, the chair creaking from the kitchen. He faintly heard his mother, Connie, softly crying, holding it in as if afraid her son would hear. Between those two sounds, Deion felt a tight, invisible rope constrict around his chest. Tomorrow he would leave. He would leave the narrow streets, the old field, the sirens, but deep down, he knew he wasn't truly escaping. He was carrying with him a handful of spiritual debts. Owed to his mother for all those years she hunched her back for him. Owed to Willie for the lonely evenings in the living room. Owed to Fort Myers itself for teaching him to fear enough to run. From that moment, he understood that he could not fail these debts. He could not fall into the same hole his biological father had fallen into. No matter the glory he would touch later beneath the stadium lights, Deion Sanders would forever be the North Fort Myers kid, running from the shadow of a city that had almost snuffed out the lights for kids like him.